The Andy Griffith Show was a TV series that traded on good old-fashioned values, and a large part of the appeal was loving how the interactions between the characters were. Though there were often conflicts in the show's setting, things never got too dark. Sadly, the same can't be said for the atmosphere behind the scenes. Join Factsverse as Don Knotts' true feelings about Andy Griffith are finally confirmed. Were Don Knotts and Andy Griffith really friends? On the Andy Griffith Show, Andy and Don played neighbors and co-workers living in the small town of Mayberry. Many decades after the show ended, the two found themselves neighbors in real life. In 2004, Andy purchased a rather expensive new home. It cost him $2.4 million and just so happened to put him in the vicinity of his old co-star. Andy and Don had some spats while they worked together, but they were on decidedly good terms when Andy showed up in Don's neighborhood. The two took advantage of being neighbors by going on double dates alongside their respective wives. As they worked together on the Andy Griffith Show, Andy was often finding himself exceedingly jealous of Don. Typically, it's the supporting star who's jealous of the titular performer. But in the case of this beloved series, it was Don who received the most affection from audiences. This was true then, and it's still true now, years after both performers passed away. Decades later, while going on double dates alongside Andy and their respective wives, it was Don who was getting jealous. The story goes that the woman Don Knotts was married to at the time found Andy Griffith's jokes a little funnier than her husband's. Either that or she was smitten with the aging TV star. The woman in question is Frances Yarborough, whom Don was married to from 2002 until his death in 2006. Don apparently got pretty peeved about his wife's constant humoring of Andy's tired jokes, to the point where he had to make a fuss about it. Little spats between the two old friends were nothing new. The incident did nothing to break down Don's third and final marriage, and he and Andy certainly considered each other close as he was passing away. Andy had immense respect for his old friend Don. If Don Knotts was obsessed with the way his third wife was laughing at Andy's jokes, Andy himself was oblivious. It seems all he cared about was the fact that he was getting the chance to spend his twilight years with his old friend and co-star. Perhaps it was these positive feelings that allowed Andy to be funny enough to crack up Frances Yarborough. Don and Andy were both considered pretty big womanizers during their lives, though many believe there were few people that the performers had closer relationships to when all was said and done than each other. The Andy Griffith Show was a series that appealed to audiences thanks to its southern charm, and Andy Griffith and Don Knotts brought a good deal of authenticity in this regard. Both were Southerners who grew up in the Great Depression, and this taught them the value of hard work. They had a close bond, and their passion for giving their work their all allowed them to put pettiness aside when working on the show. Some might imagine Andy and Don didn't meet until starring together on the Andy Griffith Show, but that's not the case. They met several years prior while starring together in the 1955 film No Time for Sergeants. Not long after, the two appeared together on Broadway. This was when they started to form a personal relationship. In addition to both being talented performers, one thing Don and Andy bonded over was the fact that they both had a propensity for drinking a bit too heavily and cheating on their respective spouses. At the time they first became friends, both performers were with their first wives, whom they cheated on quite a bit. By the time they were having jealous spats about jokes over dinner on double dates, the two had calmed down their infidelity. Don and Andy both loved cheating on their wives. Andy was married to his first wife throughout the duration of his time on the Andy Griffith Show. But that didn't stop him from starting up an extramarital affair with the woman who played his love interest on the series. She was Anita Corso, who played the character Helen Crump. The two struck up a romantic relationship soon after Anita was brought onto the series in 1963. Andy had been married to his first wife, Barbara, since 1949. The two remained married until 1972, despite the fact that Andy was always cheating. Anita's name often gets brought up when talking about who was closest to Andy Griffith. Three names that don't get brought up much are those of the late TV star's three wives. Though there was arguably no woman Andy was closer to than Anita, she was far from being the only other person he cheated on one of his three wives with. Another notable figure was Joanna Moore. Andy's behavior was allegedly fueled by alcohol abuse, which was something he had a problem with as much as cheating. Meanwhile, his first wife turned to alcohol abuse herself when her husband continued covering up affairs. Being married 3 times was just another one of the many things that Don and Andy had in common. Don's first wife was Catherine Metz, and they were married from 1947 to 64. Don and Andy also shared the fact that they both had some dark secrets. One of Andy's was that he was prone to fits of rage. Given that he left behind an impressive legacy as someone who continues to bring smiles to audiences' faces via his work, this may come as a shock. Andy's rage apparently got so bad at times he would trash cars and hotel rooms. During the filming of The Andy Griffith Show, there were said to be times where Andy's co-workers were cowering in fear because of their performers' bouts of rage. Don and Andy bonded over bad habits. Andy's rage issues caused him to seek out a good psychiatrist, and he allegedly kept seeing this psychiatrist for more than a decade. This is yet another thing that he and Don had in common. The rage Andy experienced during the time The Andy Griffith Show was airing got worse when Don decided to exit the series after 5 seasons. There were numerous reasons why he made the decision to leave, with the fact that he made so much less money than Andy as one of them. Don was the more beloved of the 2 performers. Andy was the straight man and Don was the funny one. Don knew he could make more money working on the big screen. Though it's certainly true that Don didn't balk at the prospect of making more money via pictures than he was on The Andy Griffith Show, the actor went to his deathbed claiming that money wasn't the only reason he quit the series after only 5 seasons of his 8-season run. According to Don Knotts, he and Andy had agreed before even starting on the series that it was only going to last 5 seasons. By the time filming of the 5th season started wrapping up, Don started looking elsewhere without considering that Andy had perhaps changed his mind about bringing the show to an end. By the time Don realized that Andy was going forward with more seasons of the series, the actor had already received a lucrative offer to start appearing in Hollywood movies. Given that the working relationship between him and Andy was already mired by issues like jealousy and wage disparity, Don decided to go forward with his Hollywood work and abandon the series prematurely. The Andy Griffith Show lasted for 8 seasons in total, though Andy decided to jump ship just 2 seasons after Don Knotts. The final season focused on supporting characters and eventually yielded a number of spin-off series. Don and Andy continued to be in-demand celebrities until their deaths, but most would agree nothing they did after matched the highs of their work on the beloved show. Don Knotts passed away in February of 2006, with his cause of death being related to lung cancer. At the time of his passing, he was 86. Andy passed away himself around 6 years later, with his cause of death being a heart attack. Andy was 81, and he died in July of 2012. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know that Andy Griffith was professionally jealous of supporting star Don Knotts during his time on the show, and that Don later grew jealous of Andy in his personal life? Let us know in the comments section below.